Hey guys, it's Canadian Kyle here at the Wealth Orders podcast, and today I'm joined with Dinesh Kandanchatha. He is the interim CEO for Windfall Geotek, ticker symbol WIN on the TSXV and WINKF on the OTCQB. Dinesh, thanks for calling in today. I appreciate having you on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me and reaching out and your interest.
Yeah, so we'll get into Windfall Geotech and what is Windfall shortly, but I always start off the interview by asking my guests the same question. What were you doing when you were my age? I'm 25, so what were you doing from 20 to 25 years old?
That's it's a lot longer for me than I like to admit. Um, so I was learning how to operate a business. I started my first company in high school, kind of a very classic thing, grass cutting.
Oh,
You got lots of energy and not a lot of skills, and so
sure.
ground maintenance becomes a very viable option. And so I was always definitely of the type that wanted, his own destiny in his hands. And so age 25, had completed my MBA, and I was in the process of uh, working at a tech startup that was in the digital camera space. And this was at the height of the tech boom in the late 90s. And yeah, I was getting a crash course in public markets. And those were the days when people had no problem giving 20-year-olds 5, 10, $15 million as long as there was .com in the company's name. So I was one of those guys, and I was also one of the guys that blew up all their shareholders' money. So it was it was one of those experiences. I learned a ton in the process. I learned a lot of what not to do. I learned a lot about myself, and I think that's one of the most important lessons at this age is you learn who you truly are, what you're truly good at, and what you'll stand for in terms of your principles. And so those were the things that I was spending a lot of time when I was in my 20s trying to figure out. And in the meantime, trying to figure out how to have a relationship all the while building my career. But yeah, those were very, very busy,
Okay,
busy days.
thank you. And I won't leave you hanging there. So you said you blew up the first business, but do you have successes in the past other than the first one?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. One of the things I learned earlier is I had a great mentor, and he said, "You're measured by your failures, not your successes." And it's something that I think most young people don't understand. We live in a culture that, school, those that fail in school are failures. But, in real life, those that fail in real life, fail being a verb, not a noun, those are the ones that learn, because success teaches you very little. So you're measured by your failure. So it was a pretty spectacular failure, but it was a spectacular learning experience at the same time. So, I was able to crash in a whole bunch of lessons on life and entrepreneurship, in a relatively short, 3-4 year period. And subsequent businesses, of which I've had close to 15. I've had 4 exits, 2 IPOs, and today I'm chairman of Windfall. I've also sold two businesses to private equity firms. I am very thankful, frankly, for the learning experience, and I made sure that all those shareholders did well in my subsequent ventures.
Yeah. So let's get into how did you get into the resource space and what is Windfall Geotech?
I'm naturally a technology person. I guess I'm the last generation of technology people, the guys that kind of built the web, and really got into mobile and built those platforms for mobile. So my software development years were, around those technologies, and today we're kind of in the next generation of that, which is a lot about using automation and artificial intelligence to really make our lives better, whether in the form of cars, or in the form of radiology and medical imaging. You'll see it's finding its place everywhere, e-commerce. So being a technologist first, I was looking for applications for technology, particularly machine learning, big data, in sectors that are ripe for disruption. That's one of the things that I've been very successful in as an entrepreneur is identifying those transformation points in industries, whether it's medical or in document management or fintech, when a disruption is imminent and technology can create disproportionate value for shareholders. And I saw an opportunity in the resource sector. And so that's how I came to Windfall. Is they had a proven technology since 2005, an algorithm for the detection of base metals and precious metals, and yet they did not have the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure, to be able to really scale it up. I had worked in a public safety business and taken that public in 2018, and so I had a good depth. There's another area that got disrupted by AI. Anybody who's read about how cameras are doing face recognition, that's all AI. So you know that's a massive disruption. All that in the old days,
Right.
that used to be all done by people. Now it's all done by computers. So there was an opportunity to use that algorithm from Windfall in landmine detection, which is a real big problem around the world. So that's what attracted me initially to the company. As I got into it and I did my due diligence, I discovered that this was actually an incredible way to reduce the footprint of primary exploration. And so I came on as chairman. I took a significant position. And then, you know, over the period of the COVID hit, and then over the period of the last, you know, year and a half, we've been building a technology company to scale, pivoting the model from the services business to a royalty business, an asset business, and looking at how we can generate low or zero carbon primary exploration targets. So today, when you want to generate a new mine or a new deposit, you'll go out into the woods and you'll identify a piece of land, and you'll typically go walk that land if you're a geologist.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll identify based on geological factors where you think there might be some minerals, copper, nickel, cobalt, zinc, gold, silver, for example. And then you'll supplement your ground survey with probably an aerial survey, which is done from a plane, or a drone survey. And then what you'll do is you'll take a bulldozer and you'll drag it all the way out to the woods, and you'll start digging holes. Exposing the overburden, which is the stuff that's above the mineral deposits, to the extent that you can. And all of that has a huge environmental impact. All that activity from a carbon perspective, and then environmental sustainability perspective, you're really disrupting the ecosystem. So what if you had to dig less holes? What if you had to disrupt less forest? And so that was the fundamental question we wanted to answer at Windfall. And we did that by using publicly available data. We have data in Canada for over 100 years. The
Right.
government has been collecting data of different types of sensors across the country. That data is available to all Canadians. There's no incremental carbon cost required to go do that. To go in, process that data. You just need to. It's available to all of us as part of our national trust. So what if we could use that data, supplement it with proprietary data from previous surveys, work with geologists, and then generate targets at a very high resolution? That means less than a few hundred meters across. So when you actually go out and have to drill a hole or dig a hole and impact the environment, you're doing it in a very, very small scale, because we know that most of those holes will turn into nothing.
Right.
And so, the key is to minimize the impact during that early exploration, so that you highly target both your capital as an investor, but then also your resources to the things that have the highest probability. And our algorithm helps our customers do that successfully.
Okay. So thanks for the in-depth explanation. Just to give you some context and background, I'm a royalty guy through and through. About 85% of my portfolio are royalty companies. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
attracted me to Windfall. But I want to know, how intimate are you with your partnerships? Like, does it require a lot of time? Like, how scalable is this? And what do you exactly do? Do you give them the program and they work, or do you do
No,
all
it's a
the
great
work? And
question. So why don't I answer that question in two parts? The first part is, what do we do? So
Mhm.
we are full partners with our customers. We are on a performance-based model. We get paid in the form of equity in the business, the project, the actual customers' equity, and then an NSR, which is called a net smelter return, which is a percentage of the future production of the mine. So our interests and our clients' interests are directly aligned. And the reason for doing it that way is our cost of a target generation is very, very small. So we could, of course, charge a high margin on our services and, you know, collect $100,000 per customer. But then we're just kind of providing them something and running away, right? And that really, in the life cycle of mining, like if you were buying a Spotify or okay, fine, you pay your money, go away, come back, no problem, right? But in mining sector, it takes so long to develop a mine, and there's so many factors that are involved in a resources development. You really need to be a partner if you're going to see the other side of it. So what do? We start with public data. We have three parts of our business model. The first part is where we generate targets from public data. And then we go out to companies and we say, we found this potential based on our algorithm. And, it's fairly complex, so I won't go into all the details, but, we believe that there is a deposit that is economically viable. And here are what our application says are the potential drill sites. Our customers, which are really investment groups in the exploration space, come to us and they go, okay, sounds good. We have a project within 50 kilometers. We would love to take a look at your targets. Maybe there's a way we can work together so that our existing mine can leverage your targets and the potential ore from your land claim. We would then work with them to negotiate an agreement. An agreement typically involves an investment in equity by us into them, and then by them in us in the form of paying us in services. So we do services, we do a share, we get a share agreement, we get options, and then we get the trailing, which is the NSR. So when they take the target and they drill the target, if they find something and they ever produce anything using that target, we can get between 1% and 3% of the growth of the net returns of the mine. So if it's a gold mine, and it's producing 1 million ounces a year, we would get 2% of that as our as our share, as our royalty. Those royalties themselves have value. So it's kind of like owning an option, right? So you can now trade that option. Companies are interested, they're able to calculate the value of that option, and then they are willing to purchase it for you for a discount based on future cash flows. So the option itself, the net smelter return, the NSR, has value. Our equity has value in the form that it's a marketable security. We're able to trade those. We're able to get in at preferential, very low pricing, typically under NAV, under the net asset value of the company. We get in, we help them develop the resource, which appreciates the value of their shares and their market capitalization. And we're able to then take advantage of that appreciation in the form of increase in the value of our marketable securities. We typically get a warrant as well. We're an accredited investor, obviously, so we can take part in deals that a typical retail investor could not. So that means very favorable terms. So it means that you can participate in deals by being investor in Windfall that you would not be able to participate as a investor in public markets. So that's another very good reason why our model is kind of a nice diversified ways. So that's the royalty component. We do for large companies. We also do fee for service because many of the large, big, what they're called seniors or majors, they're not interested in giving NSRs or royalties on their projects. But we are looking at other ways to monetize those relationships in the form of multi-year contracts. So rather than doing a one-off project, we would do a 5-year agreement, for example. And that brings a lot of value because obviously there's the name brand, which is big. But then in addition to that, as you work more closely with these large companies, you get to understand their portfolio of projects. And they have things that they want to commercialized, and every one of these big companies has thousands of projects that are sitting on a dusty shelf somewhere. And so if we can start working with them and they don't see any value in the project, there's potential for us to then monetize that using our technology and then sell it off to another potential company. So there's lots of ways for us to monetize that relationship. In the end, we're a technology company. So we take data, we ingest the data, we run it through a set of statistical models, and then we output the result of those models on charts. And then we work with geologists to try to figure out what a drill program would look like so that they can validate the target that we've generated.
And for your compensation, I do like the leverage component of it all. But what about keeping the lights on and short-term cash flow? Like royalties
Yeah,
take a
great
long
question.
time, equities take a long time to cash out. Usually you have to hold them for a certain amount of time. So
No,
how
great,
about
great, two great questions.
Mhm.
So we don't have any holds on our securities. Just to be clear, that's not one of the things that
Okay.
we don't put things into escrow and we don't have holds on them. That's part of the agreements that we sign. But burn is always an issue. We've been very, very effective. Being a set of technology entrepreneurs, myself and Simran, who's the president and CTO, we understand how to use computing power at scale. So we have very, very limited team. Management takes very limited compensation. The team itself, our burn rate is, in the 100K a month range. So it doesn't take a lot of deals. If you can imagine, if we do 5 multi-year deals at $200,000 a year, our burn rate's pretty much covered, right? So we're staying very, very lean on the expense side. We're leveraging cloud-based computing services, which are on a pay-per-use model, and then we work with our clients to cover the costs of the target generation. So every deal we do has a cash component in it, and we believe that the value we provide is in the $750,000 to $1 million range for most of our clients. And they end up putting up 150 to 250, so it's 25 cents on the dollar. So it's a really good deal for them, really good deal for us and our shareholders, and it really invests us in that success for our client, because otherwise we're kind of losing 75% of the upside. So it puts all of our interests on the same page, which is create a sustainable new resource.
Right. Thank you for that. You mentioned Simran, so I'll ask about him now. And here I try and understand the people behind the company. So
Sure.
why don't you
Yeah.
go ahead and talk about Simran and any other people on the team or the board that are there that you can really see increase shareholder value?
Yeah, and so when we put this team together, we made a series of management changes early in the year, and when we put this team together, the reason we did that was we really wanted to create a technology team, but we wanted to have the oversight of seasoned mining organizations, because resource sector is, every sector has its own unique little things that you don't know until you've lived it.
Yeah.
And so we weren't so, arrogant as to believe that a bunch of, propeller heads could just come in and disrupt the whole industry. So we have Nathan on our board, who's worked successfully with Eric Sprott, who's really one of the titans in the resource sector in Canada and globally. We have a series of very strong advisors from some of the largest mining companies in the world. Simran's background, he and I have worked together. One of the things I learned early, you asked about what I learned one of the things I learned when I was 25. So when I was 25, one of the mistakes I made was I trusted ideas more than people.
Mm.
So when you're young, you think, hey, you know what? If I have a really good idea, I can make this thing happen. And what I learned was their ideas are plentiful. There's more ideas than anyone in the world can ever execute on. People who are consistently able and disciplined and able to execute are very rare. And so Simran's one of those individuals who I've worked with for 5-6 years and has demonstrated, young guy in his late 20s, early 30s, I think. I don't know exactly. He'd probably be really upset that I don't know his age. But young guy, but incredibly committed, very principled, and he has no, we joke about, say do gap. Like what he says, he does. There's no oh, I didn't get it done, or oh, when he makes a commitment, it's oak. you can take it to the bank. And that for me as a chairman is really important to my management team. I have to be able to trust the people who are making commitments to me, whatever they are, good, bad, or ugly, whatever they are, they're going to deliver and they're going to be transparent with me. And so that's one of his core characteristics and one of the reasons why I love working with him. Nathan is the exact same way. And all the people on the team at the technical level, Evan, all of the folks that are on our team at the data science and technical level share those values. And so we're really a company of, young, energetic folks who are thinking through how we can not only generate disproportionate returns from our shareholders, but do it in a way that leverages technology, is low from an operating cost perspective, and ultimately more sustainable than the way it was done in the past.
Perfect. Thank you for that. It's not just mining too, though, right? You want to touch on your Draganfly partnership
Mm-hmm.
and what that market is, and that whole, how is that going anyway? Is it coming
The
along
partnership
nice?
is going very well. So we've worked together in two capacities. The first is around the public safety sector. Draganfly is a market leader in military applications and public safety applications. And so that's gone quite well from the perspective of we've been able to do some work together on the validation of our landmine technology. It's slow though, right? Anything related to military applications is slow. And like mining, mining is slow too. It seems like it's really about progressive validation, step by step by step. And so that's one side of the coin. On the other side, they're looking to build a very robust mining services business. And we've been working very closely with them around leveraging their drones which are battery based, so
Right.
very low carbon, to really provide a new level of surveying capabilities for the resource sector, including new types of sensors. So they're world-class engineering on the hardware side, with our engineering on the software and cloud and data science side, makes a really, really good partnership. So I expect that we're going to see a lot more joint projects together. Typically, when we go in and do a project, we are selling in their services as well as part of the model. And when they're out there promoting their geotechnical services, they're referring in Windfall. So it becomes a very good lead generation engine for both companies.
Okay. Thank you. Any back to Windfall, any big success stories with your technology yet? Any big partnerships that you care to talk about?
Yeah, we're still in the early days.
Mhm.
Our last project, I think, is very typical, and folks can check out the Grand Pacific deal that we did. It's publicly released. That's in a very prolific region of Quebec for gold and copper.
Mhm.
We have a very strong pipeline of over 40 projects. So one of the things that we're in the process of doing is working with investment banks, so banks that fund early exploration companies, to help them do due diligence on their projects. Our technology is an independent assessment of the potential targets and drill program that maybe you're looking to invest in. So it does two things from an investment bank perspective. One, it allows them to prioritize the set of targets that their VP of exploration at the investment is proposing. Number two, it brings another partner to the table. So as new data comes in, that project can proceed at a much faster pace. A typical early exploration project without Windfall involved would take between 2 to 4 years to reach the point where they would be able to do a proper resource program. We can do that in one drilling season because we can iterate digitally so much faster than you could do if you had to physically go out into the forest and collect your data and bring it back.
Mhm.
So that's one of the areas time kills deals, right? Everybody
Right.
knows that. So,
Yeah.
it makes things faster, less economic cost because you have to spend less money in the field doing field work, less environmental cost because you have to impact the environment less drill holes, less travel, all of those kinds of things, and higher efficiency on capital, because instead of having 20 holes to potentially drill, we can take those 20 down to 5. And all of that brings value to the banks, because what's their view? These investment banks, they need to have a higher percentage of winners so they can go out to their investors and say, invest in our next fund. And so I think that's going to be a big source of growth for the business as we move forward, is partnering with these funding groups so that we can take part in bigger and bigger projects.
Thank you. I had Dennis Lavalette on the podcast, Gold Spot. So
Yeah.
this whole AI in the resource sector, it's big money, but I still see it as very early days for everyone involved. And I saw Gold Spot shoot up really well, and it was because one of their assets in their portfolio, Newfound Gold, hit it big. It went from cents to dollars, like $10 or something. And I see the potential in this model, but I can also see a lot of competition in the sector coming. So why would we choose Windfall over the competitors?
Well, you have good questions. So here's why I chose it. And I'll speak to my reasons. I looked at the solutions. I think that there will be many players in this space. That's natural. Where there's money, entrepreneurs will follow. Now, how do you select who ultimately will win? Well, in artificial intelligence, there's 2 variables. The first variable is how much data are you able to process? And then the second variable is how much time do you have to optimize your algorithm? So why I selected Windfall was because there was no other player, including Goldspot, that had the 15 years of field experience. Even Newfound Gold is a phenomenal project, and it will be very successful, but it isn't an operating mine yet. We've provided targets from 2009, 2010 that are now in operation. So we have closed the full loop of primary exploration through resource development, through operation and royalty generation. We've done that full loop. There isn't any other company other than Windfall that I'm aware of that has done that. And so that was and I looked at the private companies. One of the questions I said to myself was, why do this in a public company? I'm a high net worth individual. I'll just start a private company. I know a lot of tech guys. I can put together 10 or 15 guys and, find a couple of geologists and geophysics and do this in a private company. But what I wouldn't have is I wouldn't have the access to the data. The public data I would, but not all the 86 projects that Windfall has done since 2005. I wouldn't have access to the incremental learnings that the tech team did over those 15 years, optimizing their data model. So there was a compelling reason for me to invest in Windfall, because those are not surmountable competitive advantages. It takes time. It may not take 15 years in the future because, frankly, technology's come a long way. But if it takes 3 or 4 or 5, it still puts us far ahead of all of our competition. So I expect a lot of competition. I expect to be 2 to 3 years ahead of them. And then my job and my management team's job is to build a brand while we deliver on the technology so that we become the de facto brand for our area. I think there's space for multiple players. I think Goldspot's done a phenomenal job in precious metals. We're looking to really own the space of base metals. Our target is to really leverage the macro electrification trend that is coming due to the electrification of the automobile industry. Tesla's just the first. All of the major car manufacturers have stated that they want to be fully electric by 2030. It takes 8 to 10 years to generate a mine, to get a mine into production. We're here in 2021. You can do the math. There's no way there's going to be enough batteries, because there's not going to be enough resources to build those batteries.
Yeah.
If we don't have if those mines haven't started being built now, they're not going to be ready. So how companies are going to need to shorten that primary exploration cycle from 4 years to 1 year, because the demand will force them to. And when they look for those solutions, they'll find Windfall.
Okay. Well, with base metals, it's not 4 years, it's even longer. And I want to know about the data on base metal, like because AI works with the more data you have, the better it works,
Mhm.
right? And I'm not a tech guy, but
Yep, I
the
understand.
more data you have, the better it works. Now, how much data is out there for the base metals? Like, let's say, I don't know which, let's just pick on tin or something. Like, let's say you need to find tin and there's not much data. Does your technology, is it less effective with the less data?
So yeah, it's a great question. And so typically what we're trying to do is we're looking for nickel
Okay.
first. And why nickel? Well, because nickel is commonly found also with cobalt, which is also required. And there's
Mhm.
tons of data on nickel because nickel, we've been mining nickel for 200 years in Canada. And so we try to find those projects, those we try to anchor in on those base metals that we have a lot of data. Why do we do gold projects? Well, the reason we do a lot of gold is because copper is usually found with gold. It's one of the minerals that are part of the refining process, but are probably not the primary production of the mine. So one of the ways that we're leveraging our technology is we'll work on a gold project and we will take a royalty on all the copper and all the non-gold resources. So now, while they're producing gold, they're not going to throw away the other resources. It's probably not the primary production of the mine, but they're still going to sell all those other minerals that they are able to refine. So we'll be able to take those percentages. And in the process, what we'll do is we are seeking out data sets. So copper, there's lots of data in the US, a lot of data in Chile, lots of proprietary data. There's big copper majors who are sitting on terabytes of data. And so working with the majors to get access to their proprietary data, our our statistical model has been optimized for base metals. So
Mhm.
that's one of the other things is we've done enough base metal projects that we can actually tune for that base metal, copper, nickel, zinc, those kinds of minerals and elements. So that's really how we're handling it. We're also working with Draganfly to build sensors that can be keyed in certain types of sensors. For example, mag is very good for anything that's magnetic. Well, there's also EM. There's lidar. So we're trying to optimize our sensors so that we can get better resolution on the data side. It's tough, transparently. I think you figured it out, right? Like data is where everything starts and stops. If you have great data, you have great potential to find targets. If you don't have great data, you now have to do what's called extrapolation, and that means that you're building in error. So a big part of the work that we do with Draganfly and with our partners is to get to a really great clean data set. And because we have this large set of projects, we know what good data looks like. We know what it means in different geological contexts. So that's again that wealth of experience that time gets you. But I suspect that data will become less and less an issue. We are in a world where data is exploding.
Mhm.
And I think we're going to have the opposite problem, which is too much data and not knowing what is relevant and what isn't. So that signal to noise ratio disappears, becomes a very small, so that you don't know. You have so much data. What data do I use? Like which ones are relevant, which ones aren't, and so that creates erroneous results. But I I think that we're well positioned to handle that problem.
Mhm.
To date, it hasn't been a challenge for us on our projects.
Okay. Thank you. You've answered a lot of my questions. I appreciate it. I do like making sure I have time for the vault segment though, and it's a recurrent segment. It won't be available on YouTube, but it will be available on my website, wealthholderspodcast.ca, and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Feel free to put it on Windfalls if you would like. But for YouTube, until I get my subscriber count up, just on my website, guys. It's mentorship like questions, just 3 questions, not related to Windfall, just
Mhm.
advice I'm looking for from each of my guests. So let's get into it.
Sure.
In the vault, like I said, 3 questions. Dinesh, what did your parents teach you at a young age that has stuck with you to today?
So an immigrant kid. I think probably like many of your viewers and listeners. And what I learned from my parents is that hard work and dedication um, is the reward and not the output. Invest in the process, invest in working hard and doing things right, doing things well, and the rewards take care of themselves. And I saw my parents come to Canada with nothing, like many parents and many immigrants, and I think it's a very common story. And underemployed in spite of advanced degrees, all the stuff that we hear about, and we know it's part of the immigrant experience. It's been part of the immigrant experience for centuries. Um, but recognize that work is what we're here to do. We're here to work. We're here to create things that are meaningful. And so that's what I measure myself against every day. And I try to do that with my kids is, you know, be happy with the work,
Mhm.
enjoy the work, make the work its reward. And then good things happen.
Yeah, I find more and more people now, it's that switch in mentality. It's all it is, but a lot of people have that, oh, I gotta go to work, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Won't get too far.
You won't get too far, right? And frankly, even if you do, you'll be super unhappy. So you might as well you're going to spend most of your life working on stuff that you will see no results for. So you might as well enjoy the process, or you know what, you're going to spend most of your life miserable, and nobody deserves that.
No. Second question. We are the Wealth Holders podcast. So can you name a high net worth individual or a wealth holder? And if you don't want to disclose their name, that's okay. You don't have to. But what did they teach you either in business or in life?
So my very first company, the CEO was a high net worth individual. This was his second company. And so what he what he taught me was um, patience. Wealth takes time.
Hmm.
Um, and so recognize that you have to be patient. You have to be creative. Um, you have to be thoughtful. Um, and failure. One of his favorite lines is, "Failure is a verb, not a noun." And that's where I got that kind of thing. It's impacted the rest of my. I think he probably got it from Robert Kiyosaki or something like that. But who's also, by the way, I've seen him. He's amazing.
Yeah.
But the net of it is that recognize that you get back up, be patient, keep grinding, and it'll work out, right? And I learned later what he didn't tell me, but I should have observed, which is do it with people you like and people who are competent, because you'll have a great time doing it. And that's what he did super successfully. Was he was able to build teams that worked really, really well together and had their own energy. And that's a big part, I think, of succeeding. And I've tried to emulate that and recreate that in the companies I'm involved in.
Basic stuff, the common sense stuff, but it's always nice hearing, right?
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
not, honestly, like, getting wealthy isn't hard. It isn't complex. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It isn't complex, but it's hard. It's kind of like getting in shape, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows how to get in shape. Exercise more, eat less. Like, you don't need to buy a book. You don't need to anything. You can keep it that simple, but
Yeah,
doing it is tough.
that's so true. Last question. I'm just a 25-year-old starting his journey in life. Any advice for the 25-year-olds and the young people listening out there?
You all, myself included, underestimate your assets. So we look at assets as being, capital,
Mhm.
uh, um, con, or degrees, any of those kinds of things. That's just a small fraction of your assets. Your connections are a huge asset. Whether you realize it or not, there's lots of ways to leverage connection. Your energy, your youth is a massive asset. There are tons of people in their 50s and 60s that have tons of money and great ideas and can't execute on them because they don't have the energy to execute on them. So go out, find people, join community groups, go to meetups now, post COVID, of course. Now it's probably hard to do it, but and leverage those intangible assets you have. Um, write down on a piece of paper, what are all my assets? And if you don't end up with 8 or 10, you need to go and talk to people you respect and ask them, what are my assets? Wow, you've got a great attitude. That's an asset.
Mhm.
Or you know what? You speak really well, or you think very logically. Those are assets. How do I get those assets into the hands of people, partners, colleagues that I can use to leverage and turn that into, shareholder value for myself and for other shareholders? And if you can leverage your assets and other people's time and money, wealth is there.
Wow, that's great advice. Thank you. I appreciate it, Dinesh. I actually like letting my guests close off the podcast, though. So here's your chance. Say anything you like about Windfall or anything to the listeners out there. But yeah, close us off, please.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, for your interest, your audience's interest. Um, Here's how I would close is, at Windfall, we're looking to bring together technology, best-in-class technology, with a mission to try to create a resource sector that is representative of the values, I think, of of the future, as opposed to the past. We're going to do so in a way that is focuses on shareholder value, um, focuses on asset and royalty model, and has multiple opportunities for investors to crystallize that value in the short, medium, and long term. And if any of your listeners want to reach out to us via our investor page, I'd be happy to set up some time with them, either join one of our newsletter or have a call with one of our IR folks. But you know, thank you very much for your interest. Thank you very much for being a shareholder. And I look forward to maybe speaking to you in the future as we get further down this path.
Oh, yeah, I expect to. Thanks, Dinesh. I appreciate your time. Really do.
Thank you very much.